Welcome to Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short. This is Pastor Mel McGinnis, and we are talking about, we're approaching the anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision. And we just got done with a radio program over at WJTN, and we were talking about the biblical basis for pro-life. And we looked at some of those scriptural passages. And we just want to continue on with that same theme of Scripture. Let's look at some of those passages a little bit more now that we have some more time than on the radio program. And let me ask you, first of all, Mel, have you preached a message at your church on some of these passages?
Yeah. And as you mentioned, it's been the most negative reaction I've received. I mean,
is that right?
Yeah, when I really jumped
wow.
into this issue of the sanctity of human life.
How did they react, or how did someone react?
Why talk about this subject?
Yeah.
I just wondered if something touched them personally. Whether something occurred in that person's life or a member of their family.
Yes, this is a common theme, and we can talk about this too. I ran into the same situation probably about a week ago. On the YouTube channel that I have, I dealt with this issue on there on one of my programs, and there was a young girl who wrote into the comments and said, why do you think abortion is wrong? You know, my sister had to have an abortion because it would have ruined her life to bring a child into the world. It would have ruined her life. And so she said, I encouraged her to have the abortion. And so she was going on and on and on about this. And I, of course, tried to talk to her about the whole idea of, you know, if you have a child, it's going to ruin your life. And I said to her, don't you think that might be an exaggeration a little bit? Because first of all, you don't know what the future is going to hold. Mm-hmm. And to say that a human life, if you bear a child, it's going to ruin your life, is really to project into the future your present fears. And I said, and I tried to explain to her that sometimes things happen in life, not planned, but you have to deal with them, and you're better off for having dealt with them and gone through and not done anything wrong, or something like abortion would be a terrible thing. And so this young woman, though, kept coming back and coming back and coming back, and I got the idea that she was trying to justify her encouraging her sister to have an abortion. So it's an emotional issue.
Yes, right.
And it is an emotional issue. I mean, people are not just simply talking about some political view. Mm-hmm. This is an intensely emotional issue, especially if a woman has had an abortion.
Yeah.
So it's almost impossible to really separate the emotion from the pure truth of this issue.
Yeah.
And have you run into that? You talked to somebody who didn't like what you preached. Was that probably behind this, that they were somehow emotionally connected?
Yeah,
to
that I'm not sure, but I gather it to be that way. And it just seemed like from then on, there was a further distancing to the point where they're no longer in the area.
Yeah.
So I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have dealt with it more, asking, what's going on there.
There might have been some emotional connection to this,
Yeah.
because that's often the case. If you think about the sheer numbers of abortion, and you think about the millions and the millions and the multiple millions of women who have had abortions since Roe v. Wade, 1973, you're talking a huge segment of our society. And then connected with them, you have boyfriends, husbands, family members who encouraged them to have the abortion, or enabled them to have the abortion, or took them to the abortion clinic, or made the arrangements for them to go to the abortion clinic. So you have millions upon millions of Americans who are connected with this whole issue, not just on a theoretical level, but on an emotional level, a heart level. And that's why it's so difficult to talk about this. And that's why we have to remember, when we talk about this, we are probably going to be heard by many people who are connected emotionally with abortion.
Yeah. And to me, it tips us off as to what we're really dealing with. We're dealing with another human being.
Right.
Not just the human being that we see, but the human being that's within the womb.
Right.
Because this is not a fingernail.
Right.
This is not a loose hair.
No. It's not a tumor
Right.
inside a person that some doctor would operate on and say the operation was successful, we got the tumor out, and it's no longer killing you, and then everyone's happy.
Yeah.
And yet you have people in our culture who are treating the baby in the womb as if it were a tumor.
Yes.
In fact, I heard a woman the other day describe it this way. She said, "This baby is sucking the life out of me. This thing is sucking the life out of me, and it needs to be taken out." And I thought to myself, how can a mother describe this baby inside of her as something that's sucking the life out of her?
Yeah, as if it was a parasite.
Right.
And haven't
What a
we
tragedy
right.
to describe a baby that way.
Right. And haven't we heard lingo like that throughout the decades of people trying to justify an abortion by dehumanizing the baby that's in the womb by using terms like parasite,
blob of tissue.
Yeah, protoplasm.
Fetus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Product of conception.
Yeah, right. That's another classic one. And then POC, instead of saying product of conception, POC.
Yeah, those words are used a lot at the abortion clinics.
Yeah.
They refer to the product of conception, POC, the procedure.
Yep. They can't deal with the reality.
Right. They want to separate reality from the vocabulary, and they want to sanitize the vocabulary.
Yes.
And make it all appear, oh, it's just a thing that we're going to remove, and it will give the woman a chance to have the life she wants to have, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a tragedy in that at this point we have so many people invested in abortion in this country that it's almost to the point where you can hardly have the discussion. It's almost to the point where you can barely talk about this in a public setting.
Yeah.
Because there is so much emotionalism and so much triggering. I mean, people are being triggered. Some of the more radical feminists are absolutely, this is almost like the one absolute in a world of no absolutes. They don't believe in absolute morality, but there's one absolute, and that is the right to an abortion.
Yeah.
And that they somehow have latched onto that and thinking that that is a woman's right. It's a woman's rights issue.
Yeah.
And you can't talk to someone who has so absolutized this.
Yes. And to me, what they're basically saying is, I have a right to murder.
Murder.
Where does that right come from? How do they justify murder? And to me, it's on such weak ground.
Oh, boy.
But when you insert the emotion,
Yeah.
when you assert the subjectivity,
Yeah.
When you assert a media and university system that continues to facilitate this kind of argument,
Right.
it's very difficult
Yeah.
to knock out what the fallacies are and their position, which is so weak on a foundational level.
Yeah, it's the argument for abortion is so awfully weak that without the academia and the media and now the government and all these other places propping this up, it would be so simple to refute this in a public forum, but you have all these counter forces propping this up. This conversation that I was getting into with this one woman, she was just totally flabbergasted that anyone in the 21st century would even be arguing against abortion. And she kept coming back to saying, well, tell me why you're against abortion. Why are you pro-life? And I said, okay, well, let me repeat it again. Every person has value. Everyone is made in the image of God. Everyone, from the smallest to the tallest, to the youngest to the oldest, and everyone in between has value. And that baby in the womb has value as a human person. And to take the life of the baby in the womb is murder. Just as to take the life of a 1-year-old would be murder, or a 1-minute-old would be murder, or a 10-year-old or a 100-year-old would be murder. It's murder, and you cannot legalize murder long term, or a society will collapse upon itself. It's just chaos, and that's what we've done. We've legalized one segment of our society for murder.
Yeah, it's almost like we're committing national suicide by killing off our offspring.
Yeah.
And
well, in Europe, that's what's happening to these nations. The replacement value, the births to deaths, replacement value is falling below the deaths. And so they're struggling to try to figure out how to solve this problem. We're losing population, and our population, the average age is going up. For example, like in the Scandinavian countries, France, Germany, England, they can barely get enough babies to replace the people who die. Well, I wonder why that problem is raising its head.
Yeah,
abortion has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, when you think about 60 million of them in America alone that have been murdered since 1973, right there, I think we see a significant reason why.
Millions. It's not just an inconsequential number. It's millions.
Yeah, and then you take away those 60 million, think about the number of births that could have occurred from those 60 million.
Yes.
There would have been a plentiful pool by which to replenish the
Social
population.
Security.
Yes,
we would have workers paying into Social Security that would be able to sustain the Social Security system.
Yeah.
But today we're going to face a crisis in the next 10, 20 years, and I'm afraid that many of the baby boomers will not receive their full retirement through Social Security because of things like abortion.
Yeah.
We're not replacing. The replacement value in this country is low, and so we're not replacing the people who are dying, and that's just a consequence of it. And that's just an example of the results of a culture of death. And so you try to make these arguments. Sometimes you try to make them on a policy level, like we just were talking about. Sometimes you want to try to make them on the scriptural level. You know, if a person has any spiritual sense about what is foundational in the Bible, you can go to the scripture and say, you know, the Bible is very clear about the sanctity of human life. Sometimes you want to make the argument on simply a common sense level about what I was trying to talk to this woman and saying, you know, do you think we should be granting the right to murder to women? Do you think that's a good policy? You know, or how about later, do we grant the right to murder to some other segment, like old people? Maybe they've lived a long life. They can have the right to murder their spouse with euthanasia. You know, do we want to begin to tell a person, a married woman, if your husband's suffering and you can see that suffering, you have the right to go kill your husband in the bed if he's suffering? I don't think we want to go down that road.
And it has implications not just for abortion, but like you say, euthanasia. And for some significant things, what we do with a person towards the end of life that could also erode how we regard the life of a human being as a person made in the image of God.
It all comes back to theology.
Yes.
And we have to, as pastors, we have to continually bring people back to theology and say, we need to be able to go to these scripture passages. We need to be able to go to Exodus and go to the Ten Commandments and say to people, God has already given us instructions on thou shalt not murder. And it's one of the Ten Commandments. It's right there. Everybody knows it. I don't even think there's an individual in Western society that doesn't know or hasn't heard of the Ten Commandments, right?
Right.
So you go back to the Ten Commandments, you show them, and it says, you shall not murder. Verse 13, chapter 20. This is the NIV version. They've done a good job in translating that because it actually is the word for murder.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a reference to simply killing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to understand the intent or the meaning of the Hebrew word going back to the original language, which was, of course, written in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a better translation than what's in the King James, thou shalt not kill, is
Right.
you shall not murder.
Yeah, because if you say, if you translate it, thou shalt not kill, then you have a contradiction. You say, well, wait a minute, God commanded the Israelites to go fight the battles. What did he want them to do? Just, beat up on these people? In warfare, you have to kill people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
sadly. And so God commands the Israelites to go and battle and kill. He commanded David to kill Goliath.
Yeah.
I mean, if the prohibition is thou shalt not kill, and that's the translation that we want to go with, then David sinned by killing Goliath. But no, he didn't sin by killing
Right.
Goliath. The translation is murder,
Right.
the unjustified killing
Right.
of human life. Because God understands that there are circumstances that killing, unfortunately, tragically, is necessary.
Yeah.
And thank God I've never had to kill anyone. I've never had to go to war. I've never had to put a gun in my hand and shoot at someone. There are people who live around us and work with us and our neighbors who have had to go to war. They've fought in the Iraq War, Gulf War, and they've had to shoot at people. They've had to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
But in the state of war, that is justified.
Right.
But how do you justify the killing of an innocent baby in the womb? Have you ever had a conversation with someone along these lines? And
Right off the top of my head, I can't remember having a conversation with somebody who has had an abortion and justified it. I have been in conversation with those who have had one
yeah,
and really regret it.
yeah,
Fortunately, that person I'm thinking of has found forgiveness for
Yes,
it, and
yes.
that I praise God for.
Mhm.
But to
That's
talk
important.
with somebody right now who has had an abortion, I can't recollect that.
Well, they usually say the right of a woman to have an abortion is necessary for that woman to have the freedom to pursue whatever life she wants to live. So in other words, she needs to have the right to abortion in order to do whatever she wants, like go to school, finish her education, pursue her career,
Yeah,
not be bothered and bogged down by caring for a child in her earlier years
Yeah.
of life, during her 20s or whatever. In other words, these are almost all 100% very selfish reasons.
the me-centered culture
Yeah.
that really comes to the forefront with regard to this topic of abortion.
Right. And why do we as a society give people permission to be selfish in this way?
Yeah.
I mean,
I,
why? We don't do it in other directions. For example, if somebody's at work and you don't like them and they get on your nerves, do you have a right to kill them?
right.
Well, they're making your life difficult.
Yeah.
They may even hurt your career. Mm-hmm. They cause mental anguish and distress. And for all kinds of reasons, you don't like them, you want them out of your life, you kill them. Should that be a right that we give citizens that you can kill someone at work that you don't like? No. It's absurd.
Right.
But when we apply it to abortion, all of a sudden, people who can see the absurdity in that area, in the other area, now go, oh, well, the woman has to have that right to kill her baby.
Yeah, that's where we can see, I think, spiritual warfare entering into this, because an abortion is a very evil thing to do,
Yes.
which, of course, the devil wants to see happening. Doesn't mind.
Steal, kill, and destroy.
Destroy.
That's where
Right.
the devil
It's so
comes.
consistent with steal, kill, and destroy.
So it's actually probably propped up and encouraged by the devil and demons.
Yeah.
They want that death to
Yeah.
linger in our culture. They want to bring about a culture of death and
Yep.
to perpetuate a culture of death, because it's within their vision for world domination. They want people fighting and killing and destroying, and they want women killing their babies.
And being selfish,
Yeah.
self-centered. And abortion is a very selfish, self-centered deed.
Well, I have heard some women say, no one should have the right to tell a woman what to do,
No one should have the right to tell a woman what
especially
to
a
do.
man. In other words, the government doesn't have a right to tell a woman what to do with her own body. What's wrong with that?
The problem is it's not her own body.
Exactly.
You've got another body. You're dealing with a different person other than you.
Right.
And we can just point out the physiology of it all. Just look at the different features. Does a woman have 4 feet? No. Does a woman have 4 hands? No. Does a woman have 20 fingers? No. Those 10 fingers belong to another human being. Those 10 toes belong to another human being. Those 2 eyes belong to another human being.
That's right.
So,
That's right. It's not her own body
Right.
at that point,
right.
because that baby is a unique individual, a unique person.
Yeah.
So when a woman says, "Well, I need to have the right to do whatever I want with my own body," yes, insofar as it doesn't harm someone else.
Yes.
But you don't have the right to do with your own body that which would harm another individual.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have an abortion, you will kill or murder another individual.
Yeah.
Now, some people say, well, I believe that it's not a person until it's born. What would you say to that?
I think that is a very short-sighted view, in that when we look at human development, that term fetus is brought up. That term fetus is used for a human being being located inside a person's body. So it's no less human
Right.
as it is, it's just in this developmental phase called a fetus, which is part of the human process. It's not potentially a human, it's already a
Right.
human being.
Right. So if you say, I believe it's only a human once it's born, then the next question would be, okay, why at that point
Yeah. That's
does
a
it
great-
become human?
Right.
Are you saying that it's not a human 1 minute before it's born?
Yeah. That's
And if you say that, right, that's not a human 1 minute before it's born, well, what gives you the right to say that?
Yep. Yep.
Because today, legally, in fact, if a criminal comes in, breaks in a home, shoots a pregnant woman, and kills both the woman and the baby, it's a double murder. He can actually be charged with double murder.
Yeah.
And so you're dealing with a situation where it's just totally arbitrary to say, well, it's a human being as soon as it's born. Why at that point? Why not it's a human being as soon as it feels pain, or it's a human being as soon as you can distinguish fingers and toes? It's a human being as soon as it develops a brain. It's a human being. You just keep going to these different spots, and they're all arbitrary.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
right.
no real clear-cut line. as far as where you would stop and
Yeah.
say, okay, this is not a human being, but then this is a human being.
Yeah.
Unless you go back, clear back to conception and say, okay, a unique human individual has been created at conception.
Yeah.
It's the only consistent spot.
Right. And can't we also utilize the aspect of genetics in all of this to show the exclusivity of a human being, or the uniqueness of a human being, merely by the genetic code?
Exactly, and that's hard science. So,
Yeah.
Well, we're going to continue in our next program on Christ and culture, but we want to sign off for this program. We're going to jump right back into it and continue to look at objections to the pro-life cause in our next program. Thank you for being with us today. This is Pastor Jeff Short. This is Pastor Mel McGinnis signing off. We'll see you back next week on another edition of Christ and Culture.
Hi everyone, Ascension Presents is here in Washington, D.C. for the March for Life. We're here to find out where everybody is from and what they're doing at home to promote the pro-life movement.
We're from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Long Island,
Baltimore,
Sterling, Virginia, South Bend, Indiana,
Tallahassee,
From Atlanta, Georgia.
Thomas More College from Northern Kentucky.
Awesome, and why'd you come down to the march today?
Well, when I was conceived, my dad wanted my mom to get an abortion, and she stood up against it and said no, so that's why I'm here.
I mean, just hearing her story and everything, like imagining my life without her would be, I don't know, unthinkable, and just defending the defenseless is just something that's very important to me.
Life starts from the very beginning, from conception. And if you can't defend life at its earliest state, at its most precious state, defenseless state, then you can't defend life at all. You're not supporting life at all.
There are all these women who believe that abortion is their only choice, when there are so many other options that could help prevent that loss of life.
When I was 18 years old, I was in high school, and I was pregnant 3 months, and I wasn't gonna have the baby, and my mom wanted to support me, so she went with me to the abortion clinic on Roosevelt in Queens, and I was waiting there, and while I was waiting there, I saw the women there with their robes, their pink robes, and they were very sad. So at that time, I just got depressed in the moment, and I just started thinking, and I guess I started praying, asking for signs, and in my mind it just came to me, I think it was God, you know. He was like, go look at your sonogram. And when I saw the picture, it was a picture of a baby at 3 months, and she had legs, she had a big head, and the arms. And in an instant, I asked the lady, I said, did you know that it was a baby? At first, I was like, it's a baby, you know, and because many people told me that it was a glob of tissue, and I was already 3 months, and I was only 18, and it's not fair, you know. But here's my daughter, she's 10, and God's been with me. I have her in Immaculate Conception School. And when she was 3, I met Christ, and that's when God revealed to me that He has saved my child through the prayers of people and the pro-life movement.
Part of it really comes down to in Christian, and that's that the very start of the Gospels deals with the Annunciation, or if it's John's chapter, it's the Word made flesh, chapter 1, and really it all comes down to life. If you don't have life, you have nothing else.
We just really believe that Jesus calls us to have a generation of life where we respect life in all its forms, from natural birth to natural death.
Fantastic. And is there anything you guys do at home to promote the pro-life movement?
Yes, we actually just started a pro-life club, so we've done, various work with charities, and
we had a baby shower for an expecting student, and she's due this semester. She's actually due next month.
One of the main things that we love to get involved in is spearheaded by the Sisters of Life, a prayer vigil outside Planned Parenthood in New York City.
Well, we have a group called Keep Infants with Down Syndrome, or KIDS. We meet every year at National Right to Life office before coming to the march. We do that to support the unborn babies with Down syndrome in the womb, and as you know, there's a high abortion rate of them. So it's very important for us to kind of just raise that awareness and support them.
we think everybody deserves life, and we think it's a great cause.
Because I think we can really make a change in our generation.
Just the march itself is like the American pilgrimage.